director of the Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center here at Howard University. Welcome to this series in partnership with Villa Albertine at the Embassy of France. Thank you very much to the Embassy of France for reaching out to us to partner on this special event. We've been looking forward to it for quite some time. This is a series that the Embassy of France created, a series called Democracy in an Age of Uncertainty, and this is the second installment of the series. I'm sure they will share more information with you later, but at this time I would like to invite our Provost and Chief Academic Officer for Howard University, Dr. Anthony Wuta, to the podium.
Thank you. Bonsoir. Good evening and welcome to Howard University. It is certainly my honor and my pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of the entire Howard University community, and in particular the topic that we're going to be discussing this evening. I want to first thank the Embassy of France for co-sponsoring this event with us, and certainly the Ralph Bunche International Affairs Center and Dr. Tania Hope and her team for helping to coordinate such an important event. And I certainly want to acknowledge my faculty member, Professor Stacey Abrams, for being a part of this panel with Rama Yade and Tara Murray. Welcome each of you to Howard University. I know if you are in the United States, our minds have been focused the last couple of weeks on the results of the most recent general election. But if you've been paying attention more broadly internationally, there have been a number of elections that have taken place all over the world that really have citizens questioning what is taking place in this age of uncertainty. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation from our panelists, and I'm looking forward to the engagement from the audience as well. One of the things that I have realized and noticed that we live in an increasingly interdependent international world, and what things take place here are not altogether that different from what is taking place in France or what is taking place in Ghana, who has presidential elections in a few weeks, or what is taking place in other parts of the world. And I think we have to be increasingly attentive to trends that are taking place, because it is no longer just what is happening in America and the rest of the world is unique. What is happening globally and internationally is interconnected and will continue to be increasingly so, particularly as we continue to move further in this age of artificial intelligence, in this age of data science. And you'll notice, if you've been paying attention, that the tactics that are being used politically are increasingly similar across the globe. And so without any further delay, again, welcome to Howard University. I look forward to the discussion and conversation, and I look forward to having an engaged audience and interesting questions that we always have from our students and from the broader audience. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wuta. At this time, I would like to invite the Consul General of France, Ms. Caroline Monvoisin. I do not speak French. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, but I don't speak French yet.
Bonsoir. Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Wuta, for welcoming the French Embassy and Villa Albertine, the French Institute for Culture and Education, to Howard University tonight. It's an honor to be surrounded by so many civic-minded students, professors, historians, and citizens. We are happy to join Howard for the second edition of our Democracy in an Age of Uncertainty event series. I would like to thank the Martin Luther King's Junior Memorial Library again for helping to make our inaugural event on September 16th such a success. were very happy with the enthusiastic response we got back then. All the more so since our goal is to bring together a broad audience of all ages, especially younger people, to discuss democracy past, present, and future. This evening's panel was planned in a partnership with Howard University and our distinguished speakers, who I will introduce to you now. Stacey Abrams, thank you so much for joining us. You have no shortage of experience as a lawyer, activist, representative, and writer to draw upon in tonight's discussion. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention your work on voting rights, among other essential aspects of democracy here in the US. Rama Yade, it's a pleasure to have a fellow French person here tonight. Your career as a think tank director, author, and former Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Human Rights, and later sports, has given you a deep understanding of democracy and international cooperation. And last but not least, Tara Murray, your deep commitment to civil and human rights has taken you from the courthouse to the White House. We look forward to hearing your insight into the role of civic engagement in democracy based on your work in the private, public, and non-profit sectors. Tonight's discussion would not be complete without our two remarkable student moderators, Grace B. Keller and Maven McGann. Villa Albertine has made a priority of inviting young leaders to play an active role in all the events on its cultural calendar. I would also like to thank the Judy and Peter Blum Kovler Foundation for their generous support, without which this evening's event would not be possible. In conclusion, I would like to quote a famous Harvard University graduate, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. When he received the prestigious Liberty Award in 1992, he warned, "We cannot play ostrich. We must descend from the indifference. We must descend from the apathy." His words remind us that civic engagement is absolutely essential to democracy, especially when it comes to the next generation. From the ballot box to community service, not only is civic engagement an antidote to apathy and indifference, but it is also an incredible tool for mobilizing people to bring about change. So tonight, let's reflect on the following questions. How do civic and political engagement differ across nations and generations? What are the similarities and differences we see between our approaches to political identity? And what are the civic engagement resources available to today's youth? Before I hand it over to our panelists and moderators, I look forward to seeing you all again on April 5th at Duke Ellington School of the Arts for the next edition of this Democracy in an Age of Uncertainty series during France's 2025 Nights of Ideas. Have a wonderful evening. Bonne soirée à tous.
At this time, we're going to kick it off with Tara Murray with some remarks.
Good evening. Thank you to Howard University, to Dr. Ruto, to Tanya and the Ralph Bunche Center, and the entire team over there, and to the Embassy of France for this gracious invitation to join you for tonight's critical conversation about democracy and civic engagement in the 21st century. It is truly an honor to join you today. It's always good to be home, and Howard is home. I want to acknowledge some special people to me that are in the audience today, my family that is here, and also Miss Deborah Watts, who is the cousin of Emmett Till and who leads the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation and has been a tireless advocate in the fight for justice for the Till family. Before we delve into our topic tonight, I want to highlight an event that I attended just yesterday at Howard's Ralph Bunche Center that underscores the power of collaboration and action. At that event, the National Urban League, an organization that I helped lead as executive director of its Washington Bureau, signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of State. Through this agreement, the National Urban League will serve as the lead civil society organization in the United States as part of the North American Partnership for Equity and Racial Justice, an agreement that was signed by the United States, Mexico, and Canada in January 2023. This partnership is a commitment to advancing justice, equity, and opportunity for communities of color through collaboration and international engagement. It embodies the spirit behind tonight's convening, the idea that civic engagement does not stop at our borders. It transcends them, weaving a global thread of justice and opportunity. Being here tonight in this space feels like a full circle moment for me. Not only because Howard University is my alma mater and the place where I came as an 18-year-old from Los Angeles, California, in search of community and the tools to become a leader for America and the global community among the other dreamers, doers, and aspiring change makers. But also because this moment takes me back over 20 years ago when as an undergraduate I sat in these very halls at an event that was also hosted by the Ralph Bunche Center that was focused on racism and xenophobia in the aftermath of the contested Bush versus Gore election. That moment, filled with uncertainty, mirrors the disquiet that many of us feel now, just 2 weeks removed from our fellow bison, Vice President Kamala Harris, delivering a concession speech here on Howard's campus after an election where democracy itself was said to be on the ballot. The question from 2000 at the very start of this century lingers even now in 2024. What is the future of democracy? Tonight we've been tasked with unpacking the complex and urgent question: how does political engagement differ across nations and generations, and what does this mean for the survival of democracy? As we grapple with these questions, I want to ground our conversation in the guiding principles that define this institution: truth and service. These words are not just a motto, they are a charge, a battle cry, and a North Star, demanding our attention as we confront the challenges ahead. Let's start with truth. And at Howard, we don't tiptoe around the truth, especially when it comes to democracy. So I know that there are some students in the audience tonight. Raise your hand if you're a political science major, maybe, or history. Raise it high. Or maybe you hail from the best school, the School of Communications, School C, and you're a legal communications major like I was. Keep your hands up, students. We want to see you. Okay. Now, keep your hands up if you believe that democracy is working the way that it should. This juxtaposition between hope versus reality is at the heart of our discussion today. The truth is this: America, in its nearly 250-year history, has never fully been a democracy. At its founding, the right to vote and participate in governance was reserved for a very narrow group: white, Protestant, landowning men. Enslaved Africans, indigenous Americans, women, and the working class were all excluded. What America has called democracy has truly been a fragile experiment, riddled with hypocrisy and contradictions. Of the students that are here, how many of you was this past election your first time voting in a presidential election? At Howard's founding in 1867, the students who walked these sacred grounds that you also walk were disenfranchised. The 20th century brought transformative progress and movements led by Black Americans, women, and others secured hard-won victories, like the 15th Amendment, which was meant to give men of all races the right to vote, the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited the unequal application of voting laws, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed discriminatory voting practices. While these advances, though continually still now under threat, have made America's democratic experiment more inclusive, it remains woefully incomplete. Today, the truth is clear. If we are to live up to America's founding principles and ideals, civic engagement in the 21st century must lead us toward becoming a true multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. That means dismantling barriers. It means amplifying the voices of those that society chooses not to hear, and it means expanding access and opportunity. But let's not be naive. Our work is stacked against us. We've seen time and again that there are many in this country who would rather we go backward instead of progressing forward. They would rather cling to exclusion and division to maintain power. Facing this truth is essential to charting our path forward. I'm going to ask my kids to raise their hand. I don't know if anybody else in here is a PK. The Bible says that faith without works is dead. And the fact is that truth alone is not enough. It must be met with service. Democracy is more than a system of governance. It is a covenant, a call to shared responsibility. In practice, the health of our democracy depends on the depth of our civic engagement, on how deeply we are willing to invest in the systems and the people that shape our lives. I want to take a moment to reflect on my own journey. As was shared, I had the privilege of serving in the Biden-Harris administration as Deputy Director of the Office of Public Engagement. During my 2 years at the White House, my role was to help lead the administration's national engagement strategy, building relationships across constituencies and ensuring that the voices from every corner of our country were heard. This was not my first foray into engagement. Throughout my career as a civil and human rights lawyer, I have had to effectively engage with clients and communities that I've served. And one lesson I've learned is that successful engagement is not transactional. Engagement that is transformative requires building long-term relationships of trust. It requires meeting people where they are, both figuratively and literally. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, organizers understood this well. They met people in their churches, on their porches, in their barbershops, and beauty salons. They built trust through face-to-face conversations that connected activism to the everyday realities of people's lives. Today, while the physical spaces of engagement have expanded, the principle remains the same. All right, I want to ask all of you to hold up your phones. Everybody has one. Okay. This device is now a critical space for civic engagement. Whether through social media platforms, virtual town halls, or text message campaigns, we must meet people here, too. Civic engagement in the 21st century means recognizing that while new tools will be added, the mission is unchanged. The fight for equity, accountability, and justice transcends generations, borders, and languages. While technology through generations has expanded the reach we can have with our engagement, we must consider technological advancements as the double-edged sword they are. For this generation, social media can amplify the spread of misinformation and lies, but it can also democratize tools for organizing. We must also draw lessons from historical and global contexts. In the United States, we know that the civil rights movement showed us the transformative power of grassroots organizing. The courage of those who marched, who set in, who protested, and who refused to stand down reverberates decades later in movements like Black Lives Matter. Similarly, in France, movements like the Yellow Vests, though failing to adequately address racial implications, highlight the vitality of collective action even as their focus and form differ. But here is a critical caution and something we can also learn from history. Engagement cannot end with a protest or a hashtag. To truly enact change, engagement must translate into power, and there is no greater power in democracy than voting. Voting transforms demands into policies and vision into law. Yet across many nations, voter turnout remains alarmingly low, particularly among our young people. This isn't just apathy, though disillusionment with institutions is real and it's also warranted. It's also about systemic barriers that make voting inaccessible or seemingly meaningless. It is our collective responsibility to not confront this reality with judgment, but to dismantle these barriers and to foster broader participation in our voting process. So to my fellow Howard Bison and everyone who is gathered here, I issue this charge. As you explore what service looks like in the context of the future of our democracy, make engagement personal. Fight for the things that keep you up at night, that stir your spirit, and that demand your action. Engage not only with those who agree with you, but also with those who hold different perspectives, because democracy thrives on dialogue, not echo chambers. Now I'm going to embarrass my kids and ask them to stand up for a minute. I do this for them. Here you have Gareth, who is 12. Raise your hand. Olivia, who is 9. And Lillian, who is 6. Just this morning, Olivia, as she did the math, was saddened that she won't be able to vote in the next 2 presidential cycles. Gareth has shared that children should have a say in selecting leaders who shape policies that impact their lives. And after the election, Lily, who still has her hand up, told me that she was writing a book called Justice for the World of People. Thank you, babies. Good sit down. Our calling is to be the torchbearers of democracy, not just for this generation, for our generation, but for the generations that come after us. So let us get to work. Let us craft a democracy that is not just a system, but a testament to our highest aspirations, a living, breathing embodiment of justice, equity, and hope, in truth and service. Thank you. And I think now we're going to jump right into the conversation with the panelists.
Firstly, thank you so much for that amazing keynote. I think we need another round of applause. Okay, so for tonight's programming, we've prepared some questions in advance, but before that, I'd like to invite Representative Abrams and Ambassador Yade to react to the keynote.
I will begin by highlighting 2 key points from Tara, which one is that we exist in between elections, but the votes that we cast or do not cast determine how loud our lives are between those elections. And that's one of the moments we're about to encounter because of this past year, and it's something that's going to be happening across the world. We have had more elections. This is the year of mega elections. More democracies or pseudo-democracies or used to be democracies showed up at the polls this year than in any point in in history since democracy really took hold. And because of that, what we know is that the phenomenon that we experienced here in the US is not endemic to us. The question is, how do we respond? France responded to a perilous moment and in a second round of voting staved off what could have felt more like disaster. We don't have a similar system in the US, but if you look at nations like South Africa, if you look at what happened in Senegal and could have happened, if you look at the Indian election, across the country and around the world, we have to exist in between these elections. And I think that then leads into the second point that Tara made, which is that our responsibility in civic engagement is to shape what that life looks like through how we engage, how we contribute, and what we demand. And so I hope the conversation we have today really focuses on the ways the U.S. has led in the past, but also what we can learn from others about how we exist in between these elections and how we make certain that the next election better reflects who we think we are.
Thank you.
First, I would like to say thank you to the Embassy of France for organizing this wonderful conversation, Howard University for hosting it, and I'm really blessed and honored to be with you in this panel. And I would like to congratulate you, Tara, for this wonderful speech. You said two key words: truth and service. It's really inspiring. I am in a position, at the crossroads of three continents right now, where we experience a democratic winter, if I can say that. In the US, as a foreigner, I have been observing what was going on and commenting as well for the French audience. Where I come from, and where we have been facing, you just said about it, Stacey, difficulties with a very strong far right. They were at the, about to take the power, the role of prime minister 3 months ago. And I work, as outlined here, on African issues. Where in the past months and years, I have been observing, all these coups d'etat happening across the Sahel. We have named that the coup belt, But even if this is a democratic winter, we are here to share solutions that hold in these two keywords you just mentioned, truth and service. So I hope that this conversation will be a fruitful exchange, how we can leave the winter and head to the spring, and maybe a democratic summer. Who knows?
Thank you so much. The first question for tonight, we heard a little bit about it in the keynote earlier, is how would you view the role of social media in shaping civic engagement? Do you see it as a helpful tool, or does it contribute to misinformation and polarization? I know as a first year here at Howard, have seen the, power of Instagram on campus to really advertise events and to stay in the loop and really be in the know. I'm sure many of you, my fellow students here today, heard about this event through Instagram. So to the panelists here today, what would you see the role of social media as? Really, anyone can start.
I can answer pretty quickly, and I shared some in my remarks. I think it's necessary to engage on social media. I don't think we have a choice, because that's where people are. And I think that though we do confront issues with misinformation and with disinformation being spread through social media channels, I think we still have to, that should not prevent us from choosing to engage on those platforms, because that's where people are.
And I would say we have to remember these are tools. But misinformation and disinformation are not endemic to this current moment. They have been around since people have been able to communicate. We've lied. People have misstated the truth. They have spread disinformation. They've tried to posture themselves in ways, and they have done it through tablet, through papyrus, through quill and quill and paper, and now through social media tools. And so I think it's important for us not to divorce the actor from the tool. The tool is how we communicate, but the actor is the issue. And so it's who is using social media and how they are leveraging social media. And to the extent social media can be used to spread disinformation and foment misinformation and create malinformation, which is the real danger of AI, that it wholly is divorced from any real intention of good. The actor then becomes more important. And so what we are willing to do to share that, to push back on that, to be as aggressive as both Tara and Rama have put it, to tell truth, that becomes then our responsibility, because we like to blame the tool, but the tool can't operate without the actor. And so our obligation is not to vest so much anger or outrage in the tool as much as we are willing to invest our time and attention and demand better action from the actors who are using those tools.
A tool, yeah, as you said, we hold the media, we don't need any authorization request to speak out and to voice what we need to voice. This is cool, and it led to digital grassroots activism, and this is wonderful. We can build communities, network, have exchanges, even start revolutions. In Africa, for example, many leaders have been ousted from power because young activists, they were on the street, they organized their networks and their communities, and that's wonderful. And from holding the media now, everyone is the media. That's the transition. You have your own narrative, you own your narrative about yourself, you tell about you, and it's about you first, and your value depends on the level of followers you have, of likes you have, and the media is not only a tool, it's a power, it's also a responsibility, because usually the media was supposed to be a newspaper, a TV with journalists, with a press card, with a training, with a deontology. And all this is gone on these media. And that's where the problem have started. Because this power cannot come without responsibility. And the powers have understood that. Billionaires buy them, and they can drive the conversation, and you even don't know, thinking that you have the power in your hands. Political powers too, they can fake authenticity, right? You can see them in their kitchen and their carrots and making cakes. But is it true? Is it what you want? Is it authentic, really? And that's how masses are driven to what they want. So they take the power back. And you think you are in charge, but you are not anymore. But to contain that, you have to think about having what the journalists have, a training, the sense of responsibility, and we are back to the start, So yeah, this is what I think where we are right now, and I really think that education should be at the very start of everything. Go back to school, learn about the world you live, where we come from, where we are going, what is the context, and then the use of this will be interesting and will really give you the power you need to have to make the changes.
Thank you, Ambassador Yade. First of all, thank you everyone for coming. I'm so happy that you brought up education, because I was wondering, what role do you all believe that education plays in fostering a civic-minded youth, and how can education systems in both France and the United States evolve to better prepare the youth?
I mean, I think education is central. You know, I have deep concerns about the abandonment of civic education in American schools, and the changing, you know, curriculum in American schools, in many schools. And so I think that education and a commitment to educating around truth is important to ensuring that our young people understand the power of their vote, the power of their voice. I think that's part of the issue with the apathy that we see. Um, Too often, young people, I think, are getting and not just young people, but you know, all people are getting their information from, you know, not from journalists, not from trained individuals, not from educated, you know, individuals, but from folks that just have a platform and have a lot of likes, have a lot of followers, and so they are the ones that are educating, and you're not getting any counter to that in the school system. You know, so I think that that is, you know, I mean, it's of critical importance. During this past election cycle, I traveled. I was in Michigan, and one of the things that I realized in talking to the young people that we were engaging there was just the lack of understanding of just the process, the democratic process of why, you know, casting a ballot, how that even made a difference, and connecting the dots and understanding that some things the president can do, you know, because there was a lot of conversation about, you know, what this person did or did not do. And some of that goes back to civic engagement and understanding, you know, there are two chambers in Congress. There's a House, there's a Senate, there's a judiciary, there's a president. There's supposed to be a balance of powers. You have to understand how these things work. And I think that is the role of education, but unfortunately, I feel like too many of our young people are not receiving that.
I think the attack on public education should not be seen in isolation. And what we know is that if you've read Project 2025 or heard anything about it, the intention of dismantling the Department of Education is part and parcel of the march towards authoritarianism. Because if you want people to cede their power, make certain they never know they had any. And if you start by dismantling education, you not only strip them of knowledge, you often strip them of interest. That curiosity that is fomented by knowing that if you have a question, you can find an answer is one of the reasons for a public education system, because as Tara pointed out, in the inception of this country, not only was voting isolated to and relegated to only a very narrow community, so too was education. There was a reason that the enslaved were, it was a law that they could not be educated. There was a reason that post-Reconstruction, the rise of HBCUs, but also the attack on those educational systems were designed to create a permanent underclass. Because if you are in a permanent underclass, I know we often use the term apathy, and I think it's important for us to marry the question of apathy with the question of despair. And part of education is about giving people a sense that more is possible. Therefore, if you strip them of access to education, you create an environment where nothing else is expected, and therefore no one demands anything better. And then to Tara's point, then the question becomes who, if you have that education, you know who to ask and who to demand behavior of. You know who should have delivered. And that's why when we see authoritarianism rise, it often comes by trying to decimate access to information. It's in the form not only of trying to disinvest from a public education system that truly democratized learning in this country, but it also comes in attacks on Head Start, which tends to be the point of entry for low-income children to even having the capacity to ask. But then you level it up to banning books, when you deny information, when you shape a narrative around what history was or was not. Those are all facets of trying to dismantle education, and you do that because you want to disarm a community of thinkers and you want to disengage them from the body politic so their expectations are lowered. With that in mind, our responsibility is to be aggressive advocates of education, to be engaged at the school board level, whether you have a child there or not, because we are all benefited by the existence of public education. And while this is an august body to be in, and this is an extraordinary school to be at, we cannot divorce ourselves from the obligation to protect education as an institution at every level and to see it as one of the tools for the dismantling of democracy. Because when autocrats come to power, one of their first acts is to disconnect people from learning, to disconnect them from knowledge. And so if we're thinking about democracy in an age of uncertainty, we are certain they are going to attack education. Therefore, our response and our civic engagement has to be how we create and how we craft a more democratized education. And that's where these tools can come in. And so I'll close with this. We have the ability to share knowledge. I'm on TikTok because why not? And there's currently two influencers that I listen to. Influence is a strong word, but I think I'm one of like 5 of their viewers, but one's an economist who's doing this really remarkable job of explaining the discourse around not just tariffs, but what does it mean to be a part of the economy. If her views went up, more people would understand how to process the information they're getting. A second is a historian who contextualizes today's moments in the larger information. So I have a podcast called Assembly Required, and I had her on. Her name is Heather Cox Richardson. She is a remarkable historian who connects the dots and shows us that this isn't new. And here's how they got through before. Those are 2 facets of education that social media can help us foment and expand with. And we have to be responsible for seeking out education, and to the extent we are possessed of more knowledge, offering our learnings to the broader public so that they too know to be curious, and we hold on to our learning as a source of power as we go through and navigate this moment.
As an observer of the American society, and maybe Madame la Consul Générale, Madame Monvoisin, and Madame Frénois, our attaché, cultural attaché, could agree with that. I have the feeling that what unites you is the Constitution. Still the case, right? And as for us, I mean, as French people, it's the Republic. And at the heart of the Republic system, you have school, education. It helps the young boy or girl who is born without nothing to reach the top of everything. We have many stories in the history of young boys and girls starting from nothing with poor parents in poor families who has been excellent students and reached the top of the society. And yesterday I was reading a letter that has been sent by a famous French writer, Albert Camus. He received the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1957. And he wrote this letter to his teacher. And he said, I take this opportunity to tell you what you have been and still are for me, and to make sure that your efforts, your work, and the generous heart you put into it are still alive with one of your little students who, despite his age now, has not stopped being your grateful student. I kiss you with all my strength. So this is what people believe in, and you can imagine what happens when school is broken or education is broken, the society is broken. And that's really key in everything And that's why educating people in this kind of society, it's educating citizens. It's different from the U.S. society where you can start from nothing and and becoming a very successful businessman, for example, a billionaire. It happens very often in the American society. This kind of profile. Maybe
That's
it
what
doesn't
No,
exist
that's a
anymore.
myth.
That's a myth. It's a myth to
There are
our,
only
our
700
Republican.
billionaires in with 700 Americans that have assets worth $1 billion in this country as of last year. They would make you think that it's a lot more
Yeah,
than that.
but this myth is at the heart of this society that makes dreamers, immigrants. They come to this country because they believe in this myth. It's something that is a very strong and powerful driver. I mean, from the outside, from the rest of the world where I speak from, that's how people think America is. The American dream.
Which is absolutely necessary. And I think the reason both Tara and I responded or reacted, that it's that the aspiration is absolutely necessary. The pathway, though, is what they don't tell you about. Because the barriers to getting on that pathway,
Yeah.
immigration, which is why this is or when people say, I voted for this man because of the economy, it's because of the myth they've been told about how you become a billionaire. They don't mention that he was born with $100 million in the bank.
Yeah, but remember, people like Barack Obama or even Kamala Harris, when they say, my story could have not happened in any other country than this one.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's important. I think what we have to, the way this all ties back together, is that we have to connect the American dream to the voting rights that make it possible to do the things necessary to mimic what we've been told can happen. And when those get divorced, because we have the mythology, the Horatio Alger mythology, that's not connected to redlining that denies you access to capital, and you can't start your business because you can't get a contract, and they're trying to dismantle all of those pieces. I think you're absolutely right that that's the story we tell, and part of our responsibility of civic engagement is making that story real.
Yeah, and people continue to come because of that. It's exactly the same. We have also our own myth, about education as the main driver for everyone who wants to elevate in this society. And when it does not work anymore, people are disappointed, are looking for responsible, but education is still the main focus because societies needs that. And for a society with the aspiration of being a democratic society, it's really a powerful driver. And I do believe that I wrote a few years ago two books about the same topic. One was a letter to the youth, and the other one was how to rebuild the education system. And and I was saying in these two books that we lied to this young generation. We did not tell them the truth. By telling them that we can make things easier for them, we have lowered the standards, education standards, thinking that they will be able to make it. And it was not true. It's like these tools, all these tools. I see all these billionaires in Silicon Valley. They hide these tools to their children because they know how bad it can be. And they know that before being able to have the control of this, they need to go to school and learn what they need to know about our history and about our future. So that's why I'm saying, for a society like France, where there's no possibility to become very quickly a billionaire, as the American dream explained to the rest of the world, so we only have a pen and a notebook and maybe being smart. And being smart is, and that is the key of the French education myth, you don't need to be rich to be smart. Anybody can be successful if that person works hard. That's it. And there's always these beautiful stories that give people hope. You can have the number one in a classroom can come from an illiterate family. the father or the mother cannot read or write, but the son or the daughter is the best of the class. This is the miracle in education, and I think that this is something we can share. It doesn't have to be from one country. It's something we can really share, and that's why I really think that education is hope, and we cannot, as adults, we cannot have the responsibility to say to the younger generation, having a smartphone is enough. No, it's not enough. It's just a device. It's just a device. The key is what you do with it. And if you have the control over the device should not have the control over you.
Thank you so much. In preparing my next question, I found that a survey conducted last year by the World Economic Forum surveyed youth, and they responded by saying 85% of them responded by saying that they felt their voice had absolutely no decision. Their voice did not contribute to the political decision making that we see here today in front of us. And also, another survey last year from UNDP found that 88% of the youth found that their voice can make a difference had their voices been surveyed. So I am curious, what advice would you give to emerging young activists who are passionate about making a difference in their communities, but they feel as though they're limited by institutional barriers, or as you had mentioned earlier, the rise of authoritarianism or even populism, not only in the States, but also around the world?
So I would begin with, if young people understood the sheer power they hold in terms of potential, if Generation Z, those who are old enough to vote, combine their powers with young millennials, you can outvote every baby boomer, silent generation member, and Gen X. There are only like 12 of us, so there is power, but the systems are designed to convince you that that power is not real. My beginnings in politics happened on a college campus. It happened in the wake of the Rodney King decision, fighting with a powerful man, the mayor of Atlanta, accusing him of not doing enough. And he won the argument because I was a freshman in college and he was the first black man to become the mayor of a major southern city, and he had done all of this work. But what he did with that power was later hire me to come and work for him at the city of Atlanta as a college student. And I tell that story because there are two pieces. One is that the power of voice does not mean that things change immediately, but part of the youth's power is the ability to put people on notice. It was when young people started demanding climate action that President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris put in place the single largest investment in climate action in American history. That did not happen because of Generation X, because we had Inconvenient Truth, which came from a baby boomer, Al Gore, and we were kind of upset. We thought we might die because the environment was changing. We didn't act. It was when young people made that a central conversation that things changed. And so part of our responsibility is to make certain we communicate effectively to young people that the power of voice is not simply the change of politicians, it's the change of policy. And that happens when politicians know you will not go away. So as the person sitting up here who's run for office probably more than anyone, I use this language, and having been one, I feel comfortable saying this, but politicians are like 15-year-old girls. They respond to money, peer pressure, and attention. And young people have less money, but you have the ability, because of these tools, to put attention on issues in ways that no one else has. We've never had this kind of power, and you contain that power. The challenge is that when it does not change in that first instant, that you consistently demand that change, and that those tools never leave your hands. More young people voted in 2020. That's one of the reasons we saw the change in policy, because young people showed up in 2020, the most populous election in our country's history, Young people were a major part of that, and therefore politicians they had to act because you paid attention. They're now going to try to convince you that it doesn't matter. And that goes to the conversations and the points raised by both of my colleagues up here, which is that we've got to remember that voting is not magic. Voting is medicine. Magic is instantaneous change because you demand it. Medicine is slow, methodical change because you are assiduous in doing what you need to do to get there. And young people, you're going to outlive the rest of us. And so holding that power now, leveraging the tools now, and believing that by engaging one another now, you can force change is absolutely true. And as Ambassador pointed out, internationally, we have seen this happen. The president of Senegal, I think it's Senegal, the president of Senegal who did not do what he was supposed to. It was young people who took to the streets and required and demanded action. In South Africa, the change of political leadership was fomented by young people engaging in the body politic. And so around the world, young people are owning their power. The way we get from a democratic winter to a democratic spring will be because young people refuse to allow us to be burdened by the autocracy and burdened by authoritarianism and burdened by a lack of ambition for who we can be. And so my clarion call is that you all can pull it off. The rest of us are tired, so we need you all to show up. So come on.
I think we can all confidently say, we got you.
I'll add just another note and observation. So completely agree with what Stacey was sharing about the inability or the lack of desire sometimes to continue in the fight, and the importance of being resilient and still going, even when the odds seem completely stacked against you. Some of that is understanding history and not just, you look at the progress that has happened and it can feel as if, maybe that happened overnight, but it didn't. Really understanding the length of time that it has taken us to move to now and to get the protections that we have now. I mean, decades, centuries, even. And so understanding your role in that and not letting go easily, even when it seems like you're not succeeding. Because I'm sure that had Stacey, when she went up against the mayor, if that loss, if she would have interpreted that as a loss and just, given up on that movement, it would not have led to, the storied career and work that we have seen, over many years now, and the contributions that have been made to democracy. So hang in there is one thing that I want to encourage you all with. The other thing that I want to encourage you around is don't just view yourselves as outsiders in government. One of the things that I did, and I don't know if this was a generational thing, maybe it was because, I grew up in Los Angeles and grew up in the same community, where the rebellion after the verdict in the Rodney King riot case came down, but I always saw myself as outside of government. I didn't see a place for myself in government, and I thought that my greatest role would be to organize and activate from outside. And that's a great place to be. Don't get me wrong, and I did that for the majority of my career. But one of the reasons why I decided to go into the administration when I did was because I started as I got older to understand that in order to actually transform systems, transform power, you have to understand what motivates power. You have to understand the things that Stacey knows, because she's ran for office, she's been a politician, she's been on the inside. So don't run away from that, don't think, oh, I'm selling out if I, go and do X, Y, and Z. Um, you know, it's important to know how to actually get things done. Whose voices are actually being listened to, so that you can then take that information and really start to transform systems. So be the outside agitators, be the inside agitators, uh, but don't give up.
That's what strikes me the most when I see all these young people demonstrating in the streets for the climate change, for Gaza, or for changing the international financial system. There's always two problems. The first one is they always say, we don't want to have a leader. We don't want to have a leader. And you mentioned Senegal, for example. In many African countries where I work, there are many youth organizations demonstrating for change, sometimes successfully in Burkina Faso and in the Coup Belt dimension. And every time they say, but we don't want any leader. Have you seen them at the top of the power? They make the change, but they are not in the office. Neither in the government, because they don't want to have a leader. They say, the second thing they say is, we don't need politics. We don't like politics. Like politics is like dirty, So yeah, you are not in the office. And they have paid the highest price. Some of them have been killed, some of them have been put in jail, but they are not in the office because they don't want a leader and they don't like politics. But if you don't come after politics, politics will come after you. So you have to fix these 2 points. You need leaders. No matter who is, you have to recognize a leader among you. And it can be you, it can be your neighbor. And two, you need to run for the office. You need to go there. This is really, and if the context is not good, do like Stacey, with the registration process, she built her own people. So, and it was not easy. It's difficult. You are threatened. You can lose your job. You cannot sleep. That's the price. You have to be ready for that price. No, it's more complicated than just a tweet. That's true, but that's politics. That's how you change the world, And age is not an excuse. Absolutely not. You can start very young. I mean, when I was in France, I joined the cabinet as minister. I was 30. I started the process 28. And I remember I participated in the campaign of the future president. It was Nicolas Sarkozy. And after our campaign, so he came into the office. He won the election. So I went back to my job, my regular job, and somebody from his team called me and say, "Oh, we mentioned your name to be a member of the cabinet." I said, "Oh, really?" Because I did not think about it, like everyone. I did not think about it. I said, "Oh, really? Oh, surprise!" And she said, it was a lady, "But we think you are too young." I said, "What? Too young? No." So, can I have an appointment with the new president, the president-elect? Can you imagine having an appointment, a meeting with the new president-elect? This is just, it sounds impossible like this. So what could we lose? Nothing. We could just say no. So let's try. So I got my appointment. And I said to him, "It seems that my name has been mentioned here, but I'm too young. You have been a mayor of your city. You were 28. So you cannot do that to me." So he laughed and he said, "Okay, I will call you after the local election in 2 months." So I could have went back to my home and wait there until the phone rings. But I understood the message. The message was, you have now to campaign for it. So I traveled everywhere in the country campaigning to support our local candidates until I have been able to do it on television, etc., on my own, without no support, no nothing. And one day the phone rang and they offered me to become Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Human Rights in the new government. It was not expected. I was the youngest in our history of the Fifth Republic to be the youngest. Since then, have been younger guys, including a prime minister of 34-year-old, you know, and maybe one day of 28. No, he's 29 now, but it's younger and younger. What I mean is, by telling this story is, yeah, everybody can be an insider, but you have to start by voicing what you want, by trying, and the worst thing that can happen is a no. And then you do it again and again until it works.
There was one other distinction to your appointment that you might want to mention to this very specific room. You weren't just the youngest who got the job. There was something else about you that was different than anyone else who
Yeah,
ever had the job.
a lot of stuff to handle at the same time. So I focused on because the other piece is just, wow, it's another story for another meeting about race, gender, and age. It was a lot for a country like us, but it's another piece. But what I mean is yes, it's important to have leaders, and it's important to commit and to go to politics, because that's the only, even if people don't like politics anymore or vote less than before and everything, they still have the power of they decide about the level of taxes you will pay, the quality of your schools. They still decide if you have the right to buy a car or not, to go to the moon or not. No matter the power of this, they still decide about all these things in your life. So the power still lies in politics. So yeah, and in Africa, because we're talking about Africa, why young people are so, we have so powerful activists in young generations? Because it's a very young population with very old leaders. And this gap is the major challenge of African societies today. And that's why you have all these grassroots activist movements like le Ballet Citoyen in Burkina Faso, you have La Lucha in the DRC, you have le Yanamar in Senegal, and all these youth organizations, they are very brave. Every day they are facing prison, killings, everything. And they are fighting because they are the youth of the world, you know? And I think that doing what they are doing, they will have a leading role worldwide tomorrow, because it's just 2.5 billion people are coming. It will be the most populous continent in the world in 30 years. This is huge. So, and they are trying to have this reality, demographic reality, be reflected in politics. And I think that for all our countries, it should be the same.
If I may, I'm just going to point out one reason I wanted you to emphasize the dimensions of your success is that in the wake of the election 2 weeks ago, there's this diminution of belief that a woman of color in the United States can access power. And I think it's just very important for us to not skip over your success was because you were competitive on a range of issues. And while your race and gender and age were markers, they were markers of how difficult your path had been, but also of how resilient your purpose has been. And I think that's an important piece to hold in this moment when the weakness of political ambition can feel very compelling, that it's not enough, that we're not enough. And I think it's critical that when we sit on stage with someone who was not working with the easiest president, that, and in a moment, and in a society that doesn't always articulate the challenges, but makes it very real that those are challenges you face, I think it's just really important that we celebrate and acknowledge and learn from what you were able to accomplish. So I know I was going to let you get past that too quickly.
I'm watching you, I'm learning, so I feel blessed.
Yeah, if Maven and I had all night, we would continue to pick your brilliant minds. But we are going to share this time now to open questions to the audience for a Q&A portion. I think we can pass around the mic so you can stand up from where you are and just call out your questions.
Last question was in both. Thank you. In both the United States and France, in the recent elections, we've seen increasing levels of political polarization. How do you think this affects the youth and the general public's view of democracy, and how do we push past that and become one nation?
I will say this, polarization is not new. What is different is the dimensions of the polarization. The attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion are part of those dimensions. We are undergoing a demographic transformation in this country, and the ambassador pointed to what is happening on the continent of Africa. There is a sea change happening in what power looks like, and there is one dimension to this polarization that is resistance to change. It is resistance to the new reality of who will have power and fear of what power in these other hands looks like. There's also polarization because of competition. We had a nation that was for 200 years organized around a very specific model of power, access, and success. And that has been fractured. And so part of the polarization is that we have now gotten to a place with lots of work where more people have access, and therefore more people have the opportunity to compete. And there are those who want what new offers, and there are those who long for what old gave them. We have never been, so being one country has never been because we are of like mind. It was because we were of like ambition. And that ambition ostensibly was that we all had a chance to achieve the American dream. We all were going to be different in how we got there, and divergent in our opportunities, and uneven in our success. And what's happened is that there are communities who have decided that they don't like the new reality. And they're legitimate critiques of every part of government and every part of society. But we cannot believe that there's going to be this moment of uniformity of belief. But we have to have uniformity of ambition that all of us should get to compete. And so when we hear the debates about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're going to hear this over and over again, that we should return to meritocracy. There was never meritocracy. Meritocracy meant you were born on third base and you got to stroll to home. And the rest of us got to at least know where the field was. We are responsible in this moment. If we want to get beyond polarization, it is that we have to claim and own our right to be a part of this community and of this nation and of this global community. And that means we have to demand diversity, fight for equity, and resist the notion that inclusion is somehow a harm. So when you hear DEI, what you need to hear is that by giving up DEI, you are giving up on you are allowing polarization to become permanent, because they want there to be just one pole. And our responsibility is to demand that we have access to as many opportunities, and that we have the right to the American dream, myth or not. We should at least have the right to learn for ourselves that it's not real. I think it is. I'm being slightly snarky, and I don't want to do that. We should be able to create our own American dream, but we cannot do so if the only way to get there is to deny our own difference. And that's what's causing a lot of the polarization that we're seeing in our society.
Thank you.
My first time coming here to this revered institution. Thank you for a great, very stimulating discussion here. Thanks to Villa Albertine for creating this opportunity for all of us citizens who are not students here. I'd like to ask this question in the spirit of advocacy for the young people who will hopefully inherit a good democratic future. 60% of the people in the country do not go to an institution of higher learning. All of you here, students, are going to are at this institution. You're getting good information. You're making your choices. How do we mobilize the remaining 60% of the young population in the direction that they should be going, so that they can also create a good democracy for everyone?
I want to take that on. Thank you for your question. I think part of it lies in not forgetting the people in the communities from which you come. I know a lot of the young people who come to Howard University come from, not everybody, because, you know, one of the things I loved when I came to Howard was that it expanded my view of blackness. You know, but there is a population of students that, you know, you come here from your communities, you know, from different places. Not everyone who attended high school with you, middle school with you, you know, has gone to a higher education, an institution of higher education. And it's important when you get here to not forget about the friends that you had that maybe did not make it to where you are today. And I think far too often what happens is we get to places of like Howard, other universities, you know, we you know, advance to different levels, and we don't authentically still remain connected to those family, to those friends, to those other community members from where we've come. And it is our responsibility, our obligation, to ensure that we are not just advancing, but that we are pulling all of us up. And so I think part of the charge for young people with advocacy is understanding that we're not just talking about advocacy and engagement with power, right? We're also talking about advocacy and engagement and the importance of doing that, you know, with the friend in the neighborhood, the friend on the block that's still there. I started my career as a public defender, and part of the reason why I did that was because I wanted to remain connected to people that did not have the same opportunities as I had had. I wanted to be a bridge and a voice and help to amplify their voices. And I think that is going to be critically important, to not lose sight of where you've come from and the people that you know. So that's the main thing. We can't leave our families, our neighborhoods, you know, our friends that maybe have not had the benefits of the access and the opportunity that we've had behind.
One more? Oh.
Hi. So my name is Amber Robles Gordon. I'm a visual artist and actually graduated from the art department at Howard. So I have 2 points that I want to point out. One is the reason I knew about this or found out about this was probably an hour and a half ago, because I know the art chair of Duke Ellington, and this has happened and yes, I love Howard. But I also have this question or critique of many of our Black institutions. And I think this is one of the most important times to reiterate that, is why is this room not packed? And I say all that I'm about to say, I'm going to with love. Why is it not packed? And I'm not putting it all on the department. I am putting it on our institutions and how we have not figured out a way to be friggin' interconnected, interdependent, and intercommunicative. I can't think of a word, but we haven't figured that out yet. And I'm just saying it needs to happen. This has happened where I've by circumstance of knowing somebody who knows, and happened that I decided to not go to the art talk that I was going to go to, but I wanted, because Miss Abrams was here, and I was like, oh no, let me make this happen. Okay, so that was my first point. And then the second is, I don't know if this is a question, but it's an observation, because absolutely, I think I'm still in mourning. And it's not necessarily only because her name just went out in my head. Forgive me. What is Vice President-elect? Harris. Thank you, Harris. Not only because she did not win, but it's that her loss, the loss, what it means for our society, what it means for my child, who's 27, what it means for the future of generations. You know, I don't even know how to express it, but I'm sorry, I went into the loss real quick, but what I'm trying to get to is that when did our society start, you guys mentioned civics, and I think that this is so important because it's really about how we treat each other, how we hold each other accountable, how we, throughout our lives, throughout our education, throughout our, like you said, communities, how we look at each other and continue forward. And my problem is, like, I spoke to somebody who voted for Trump, and just hearing a person say, and it was a person of color that says, you know, I know that people fought and died for the right to vote, but it's also my choice to choose not to. And I thought to myself, but Jesus, I don't know how you can say those things. Fought and died for, and you chose not to, right? And so that's my perspective, and I've been voting since I was 18. But when did that change to that degree? And again, this is not necessarily a question, maybe it is a question, but I needed to express that.
Well, do we want to do a couple more and we can just kind of wrap it together?
Can I get a student? Sorry.
Thank you. This question is actually more of a, it's still a question, but it's an answer type of question to the previous remark. I'm Khalil Windsor Wilkes. I'm a junior honors history and international affairs double major from Oakland, California. And I guess my big question is, could Kamala Harris have been elected to the presidency if it was 2008? Like, if it was her and not Obama, could it have happened then?
The question is, was the gender the problem? Race is gender, yeah. What is the most? The guys have the expertise here.
So let's take this third question and we can kind of wrap them all together.
Okay, very quickly. I'm new to your community. I am a Central Asian woman who grew up in Europe and moved to America, and primarily my world in America has been a white male exclusionary world. It's been the military, 15 years of that spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. The misogyny and the racism that I felt in places like Iraq, not on the part of the natives there, but on the part of the American military. coming home, not the uniformed military, it was the civilians in charge. Coming back to America, it has shocked me that you have it here as well and seeing it in politics. I think the most basic fundamentals are, how do we get people to recognize the problems that are there? Whenever things are okay, we don't address those problems, but that is the time when we should be addressing those problems most vociferously. And hence I look up to ladies like you, Ms. Abrams, because you have done a fantastic job of having people listen in an extremely cloistered environment, say a state like Georgia. However, how do we get voices like yours to be heard on a bigger platform? And that's my question. Thank you.
So to tie these all together, one, we look to institutions, but we are the institutions. Institutions are comprised of people, and people are fallible, they are fragile, and they are absent-minded. And so one of the reasons today's conversation, and I want to thank our student moderators for their very deft guidance of these conversations, it's how do we, knowing the frailty of our institutions, how do we insert ourselves to cover them? I'm a member of the Democratic Party, and there are going to be lots of comments about what the party should have done. And my constant admonition is that one reason for civic engagement, one reason for our coming to these spaces, is that we are the ones who hold accountability. We are the ones who force better behavior, but we're also the ones who fill in the gaps when people don't do what we think they should. And so that is not an excuse, but it is a call to action. When I was walking in, I had a conversation about funding for HBCUs and why HBCUs are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy, why Tennessee State University is about to lose its entire faculty, basically. And there's an organization called the United Negro College Fund. But because of the urgency of the moment that led to the creation of UNCF, when that moment passed, so did attention. And people will say, well, why aren't we doing? We are the ones we are waiting for. And it's a common trope, but it is true. There is nothing special about me. I saw that people weren't registered to vote in Georgia. I started begging people to give me money so I could help register people to vote in Georgia. It kind of worked. Yay. But the impetus did not distinguish me from anyone else. It was the intention. And that's what civic engagement is. Civic engagement is intention married with action. And so maybe in 2008, Vice President Harris could have become president. The issue was, would we have even considered that opportunity given the zeitgeist that existed in that moment? It feels good to think about what could have been. We are responsible for creating for what will be. And that's our responsibility. We cannot retcon what we thought could have happened. I'd love to do that because there are a couple of elections I would have won. But that doesn't work because we exist in the moment that is. And in this moment, there are those who give more primacy to their comfort than to our humanity. And so a person who says, I voted this way because it was comfortable, because I cared about the price of eggs, congratulations to you. But what you've given primacy to is something tangible versus the liberty that I need to enjoy. And so we can't fix people. That's not our job. Our job is to address behavior. And the way we get more people to vote is to acknowledge the challenge, but also to acknowledge our numbers. We cannot exist outside of coalition. If every African American in America voted, we would still not have enough votes. We must build coalition with the Asian American community and with the Latino community and the Native American community and the white community. We have to build coalition, multiracial, multi-ethnic, and multi-generational. And so I would turn this conversation back to the young people in this room and on the stage, which is to say that we don't know what could have been, but we know that there's another election coming up. And what are we going to do starting today to make certain we're not having this conversation 4 years from now about why we didn't get it done this time? I think that covered everybody, but I'll turn it over.
Really quick, thank you so much, Representative Abrams, for that call to action. I know you have another event to go to or another obligation, so thank you for your time today. if you guys want to stay on, we can keep asking questions, but if not, this has been an amazing conversation and very, very motivated.
I apologize. Before I leave, can we give these two young people an amazing hand?
And can you all give yourselves a round of a hand for showing up, a round of applause for showing up today?
Are there any more questions?
Thank you. This is sort of a full moment for me because I canvassed for Stacey Abrams when she was running for House Representative in Georgia back in 2014. But I'm pulled in this room for that reason. I'm also pulled in the room for the amazing women that are still on the stage, Ambassador Rama Yade, and as well as Tara, for your work. Thank you for the engaging conversation. I really liked the concept of looking at this metaphor that you talked about, the democratic winter. It reminded me of the Arab Spring and the technology and your commenting on that. Looking at Africa as a person who comes from Africa, was born and raised in Guinea, with the dictatorship, militant occupation, if you will, with an administration that's refused to bring up forward elections. What are your thoughts on this cool belt, and do you see that as a permanency, and do you feel that the United States and the way the United States is heading towards non-democratic values, do you see that happening throughout West Africa? And I say that because growing up, we've always seen the U.S. as sort of the democratic police, and now it seems like there's an absence of a democratic police, if you will. So what are the implications moving forward? Long question, sorry.
Yeah, this is a but relevant question, and we are thinking about that question every day, actually. We have these co-belts with these co-leaders, and they came to power thanks to a popular support on the ground, right? Even if a part of this support has been organized, we all have friends in Africa. We know what public opinions think about these guys, and they have supported not because they like military powers. They have supported because they considered that the previous regimes were not really democratic, but they were presented as democratic. They don't like double standards either. You know, they considered that the previous regimes have failed. It's exactly like in these Western countries, you know. I was reading a poll about France a few months ago in July, saying that almost 60% of French people would like a strong man at the head of the state, you know. I don't know what it means exactly, but it did not sound very democratic, you know. But because people are disappointed by the regular powers, you know, that's exactly the same phenomenon that happened in Africa. So what strikes me the most is how the concept of democracy itself, not only the practices, but the concept has been questioned. People reject democracy by saying it's a Western value. First, is not true, absolutely not true. You know, the first Charter of Human Rights of mankind is an African. It's the Mandate Charter, you know, 13th century, even before the Bill of Rights. And you have many communities in the past in Africa that were very democratic practices in many communities before colonial powers. But Africans, they need to, you know, they have lost the control over their history because of slavery, because of colonialism, etc. But if you learn your own history, you will see that democracy was there long time ago. And this is not the Western value that is being brought in. It is, and I think it's very important for Western partners to understand that too. So when they come with democratic values in their hands, they won't be seen as colonizers, but more as partners. That is very, very important. So now where we are is, I think that a military power cannot last forever, given what we have in these African youth. They have chosen independence over democracy. That's what happened. They had the choice. You know, democracy, it was fake. The democracy they had before in Niger, it was not what in Mali, corruption, underdevelopment, all these things, terrorism, it was a failure. So, and they thought that the international institutions, World Bank, IMF, the former colonial powers, France, the United States, all these countries, all these institutions represented something very far from their real independence. So they have decided to prioritize this independence over democracy. So even if these powers are military powers, who cares? We want to retake the control on our own future. That's what happened. But the next question will be about democracy. Because when they will stay there without any civilian transition, maybe failing, economically speaking, or against terrorist movements, the question of democracy will be asked by the people. Why are you still there? We have not chosen you. You said that it will be only a transition. So democracy, it's a long, it's a winter right now, but it's a long way. And it's a culture, it's an education, and I think this story is not over. And I don't see why everybody in the world would deserve democracy, but not the Africans. There's no reason why they should live under authoritarian regimes. Freedom is for everyone. You know, I mentioned earlier my role on human rights. I believe in the universality of human rights, and there's no reason why it would be a Western value or practice, and for Africans, just darkness. No way. So that's why I think that these young populations and young activists that supported these coup leaders, one day they will ask explanations about their own future. So to be continued with just season 1.
I'd just like to share, I'm at Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and my colleague who teaches communications, we're in class together day before yesterday, and she was teaching through pbs.org subject of race in the pbs.org website, and everything about race relations has been erased. WETA.org, which is PBS, has been erased. We cannot get the subject material, anything that has to do with community, race relations, the study of anthropology, inside of this week, gone. Like last week, we were like, oh, what's happening? I can't find this. And now all of it is gone. And Trump has not even taken office yet. So go into your platforms, if you will, for the various sites that you may look at to gain information, and look to see if these things, so you can grab them potentially before they're gone, as well as books. Many of you might be having this conversation to go to bookstores and get books, because I mean, not just they're banned, it's here, and we really need to just want to bring that to your attention, if you will. And I'm in a high school in DC.
I'm going to go to some students in the back.
Hello, my name is Ihoman Baharike. I'm a freshman film and TV major, and my question is more like an answer to the previous question about why there's a lack of students here tonight. I feel like it's because like there's so much going on with like the spread of information. Everyone's getting their things from social media. And when you see every single feed about, oh, there's a club meeting, oh, there's a food thing or something like that, like the importance of this type of like event gets missed through each scroll. And I don't know how we can fix that because that's like also an issue with like Howard of spreading information or getting club information of what's going on campus, who's here, and I don't know. I feel like another issue would be like the location of it all, because I'll be honest, I didn't even know this place existed, and most people are usually at Blackburn or they are at like the central place of like we have to be like what's it called, like particular about where we're hosting these things. How are we going to get more people? How are we sharing the information? Because even though I did get like an email about it, most young people do not even look at their emails right now, I'll be honest with you. So we have to like transform our way of communication outside, like with social media, but also outside with social media, if that makes sense. So, yeah. And to alumni as well.
We also have to make sure that conversations like this are relevant. And that we are, and part of the way that we do that is by, engaging people and understanding what is it that you want to hear, what is it that you need to hear, and understanding what the issues are so that you can make your content engaging, you can make it relevant to the moment for them, but you also have to be very, very intentional, and I think that's what you were getting at. And I just want to go back to what Stacey was sharing in terms of the charge, that we have to be the change. So I think even as we sit and ask and wonder, why are there, why is the seat next to me empty? Why is the seat? I think we have to turn it back on ourselves and say, well, who did I bring? Who did I tell that I was coming today? Did I send this information out? Did I ensure, in something with, mobilizing people around voting, you say, make sure that you bring friends to the polls. You're not just going alone. And so as we think about engagement and what that means and what our collective responsibility is with that, we also have to hold ourselves accountable.
Good evening. My name is Zuri Gascombe. I'm a first-year honors international affairs major and French minor from North Carolina. Just wanted to thank you all. This has been super enjoyable. But Ambassador, you mentioned the election where the far right in France almost, won the premiership after they were projected to. And I watched that election, and obviously I watched our November election. And I kind of had the hope that a similar thing would happen where, sometimes Trump was projected to win. But I hope that, I had the hope, that a similar thing might happen where young people and other voters might mobilize to prevent that from happening and, keep democracy safer than at least I think it is right now. And you also mentioned, the difference where in the U.S. the Constitution ties us, whereas in France you're tied by the Republic. And I was wondering if you had any opinion, and for the entire panel, if you had any opinion on why voters in the United States weren't able to achieve that. And I know that they're two different countries, but why the difference between voter mobilization in the two countries and, why the results were so different.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Stacey mentioned what I will answer in 2 points. The first point is what Stacey mentioned earlier. We named that the Front Républicain, Republican France. Can I say that? Yeah, it's very French. I have not seen that anywhere else. Even French thought it was dead and over, but surprisingly, they decided that it's not the case. The Front Républicain is when we are in a, help me guys if I don't say the right thing here, we are in like a position where the far right is about to take the power. First round, they are heading the polls there first. And if you do math, you can understand that they are going to win the second round. But before we get there, left and right decide to unite their votes against them. You see what I mean? Even if you are a rightist person in a local election and you have an opponent from the left, one of them will withdraw from the race so they can merge their their results, and then they can fight in an easier way, and they win the election. That's how it worked in many local elections in the country. That's what happened. They joined their forces. The Republicans, what we name the Republicans, mean those who respect the Republican rules, if I may say so, and that's how it worked. And everybody thought that the populists are so strong that it not work anymore, but it worked. And it was a surprise because that's not what polls were saying, were expected. And that's how, the Republic saved itself from the far right. And so they were the first surprised something like that happened. You don't have that in this country. Yeah, you have only two Democrats, the Republicans, and that's it. You cannot just remove one piece from the chest. He's there. And there's no other party that could have supported Kamala Harris. There's who we don't even know who were the other candidates. They were too small. In France, they are not so small, so they united, they joined their forces, and they can beat the populist person, So it did not happen. But what strikes me the most, and it is the common ground of these two democracies, somebody were asking me, would you like to go back to politics? I was like, I left in 2018, and if I had to go back to politics today, things would be completely different. I explained how it started when I was 30. Just like, okay, I have talent, I campaign, so just choose me. And he chose me, and it's okay. Something like this could not happen anymore. And if I wanted to run for some national campaign like I did in 2017, the presidential campaign, usually what do? We have a project, a plan for the nation, right? A program for cost of living, education, security, foreign policy, all this stuff. You have a team, right? Advisors who will help you for this program. You hire communication agencies. You go on TV, etc. That's the classic campaign. That's how it used to work in any country in the world. Now, if I had to say, it would be completely different. I'm not saying that what I would do. I'm saying, as an observer, what I'm saying is no need to have a program or a project for the nation. No need. Because you have to speak to communities. And these communities, they have specific needs. They don't communicate with each other, because those are on Instagram, those are on TikTok, those are in the university, those are in the street, those are, So they don't dialogue, they don't have any conversations with each other. So you can have a specific program for Latinos, a specific program for Cubans, a specific program for black men, a specific program for young students, and because of social media, we don't take the information at the same places. We are not informed the same way. There are different communities, and it's not about race or gender. They just don't have the same way to get informed about what's going on. So to reach these people as a politician, you don't need to stand on some square and make a global speech for the entire nation. You just organize your time and you go to speak to different communities and you make different promises. And you don't need to have an advisor for foreign policy or something like that. You just need to have a social manager who will handle your accounts, and be sure that you are everywhere on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on this, on this, on this. That's how it works. But don't forget television. It's still power. I think that television is still powerful too. But here you need a billionaire, because they own TVs now and radios and newspapers. So you need to have friends there. And they are more and more, they are very concentrated. Just a few of them. There are 5 or 6, not more. So you have to be in some friendship with these guys. And it's over. And you don't even need to meet with voters. You remember what we said about Kamala Harris organizations on the ground? The number of doors they knocked at? They did not see any of their opponents doing all these things. Millions of doors. It was a very classic campaign versus podcasts and social media and YouTubers and etc. So that's why we have this very bizarre election where we talk about black men, women, Latina, very specific communities. It's different from what we had before, and we have the same situation in Europe too. It's exactly the same things. And a few years ago, we used to say what happens in America comes to Paris, will arrive to Europe in a few years. Now, because of the viral information, you don't need to wait years. It's just there in a minute. So, is it cool to do politics like this? I'm still here talking with you because I don't think that's what we should do, when it comes to politics. But unfortunately, I think that's how it works right these days.
Okay, we're gonna take just 2 more questions, and I'm gonna let the student have the last.
Hello everyone. So my name is Hamza Jimli. I'm working at the Embassy of France in DC as the national coordinator of the Alliance Française network in the US. However, I'm going to speak now as a first generation child of immigrants from Algeria and part also of the LGBTQ plus community here, at least in the US. During the panel, so we frequently compared the democratic system in France and in the US. Democracy and equality are often seen as deeply connected. However, in practice, while rights have been progressively achieved during history, the true equality remains an effort. In the US, racial coalition serves as a powerful force to bring voices in the public dimension, while in France, even the term race has been removed from the official dictionary because we raise the conception of assimilation. This statement brings me the following question: how can we foster and build these collective public voices in France when we are related to minorities? Thank you.
I'm gonna take this last question,
Okay.
and these are the last 2 questions.
Hello, my name is Garrison Andrews. I'm a freshman political science major, history minor from Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I'm a member of the second cohort of the Humanities and Social Sciences Scholars Program, and my research interests entail conflict resolution and the intersectionalities of international affairs and history around producing equitable and enduring outcomes. I'm a young person who's interested in entering the international affairs landscape one day, particularly in a capacity within West Africa. In the Coup Belt, as it's been referred to here tonight, it's been stated that there is a greater value present for independence rather than democracy. We know that paternalistic methodologies aren't effective. and I'm interested to learn how we as Westerners can effectively engage these nations to promote an equitable international landscape between equals. Thank you.
So, yes. Maybe I'll take that. You take the question about France, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. So, good to see you again. I think that one of the things that we have to do is to be honest about our own histories. I think the challenge that we have in this country, I mean, we take a very paternalistic view to the way that we engage with the rest of the world. So we think as if we know, and we're going to go somewhere else and teach them about our system and what works. When in reality, they can see all of the issues that we have in this country, and the fact that we have not lived up to our own ideals and the things that we are trying to, purportedly bring to them. And so I think that there has to be an acknowledgement of that. One of the things that we haven't talked about, and I mean, I feel like we could have a whole separate conversation about, is reparations in this country, being honest about our past and repairing and what that actually looks like. But that's another conversation. So hopefully the Ralph Bunche Center will host that, and I can join for that discussion. But I think that as you think about your trajectory and your education and your future career, it will serve you to understand the same principles that we're sharing here about what engagement means, and really understanding people, community, and not just bringing something to them, but listening to them, and letting that guide the way that you inform, the way that you do the work that you do, will serve you beyond civic engagement. It'll serve you in your international affairs work. It'll serve you, beyond what you might even envision at this moment as you sit in this chair. So I just want to encourage you to be a person, if you aspire to international affairs, that is honest, that leads with that truth. Because one of the things that I frequently heard when I lived in London and I traveled the world was that we see the hypocrisy of the United States. You come to us and you say, and this wasn't in London, but I represented men imprisoned in Guantanamo and traveled the world as a result of that, to Pakistan and to other places around the globe. And one of the things that was repeatedly shared with me was that, so-called Western countries, attempt to bring and transport these ideals without talking to us, without understanding what our true needs are, and also without being honest about your own wrestling with these principles that you're trying to export. So it's important that you wrestle with that now, and that you educate yourself now. I want to say also to this young lady back here, they're different systems. So even though, United States has a winner-takes-all system, it's one election, and that's it. There's not this tiered approach. There's not this opportunity to join forces in government. And so it's different. And so I would encourage you as well, to educate yourself about the different forms of democracy, what it looks like. That was something that I was struck by when I lived in London. I was like, oh, so you mean that, it's not just, if you get a certain number of votes, then you can discuss with each other and, come together in coalition government? Like never, it's not anything that we have here. But it's an interesting model, and one that, perhaps, in our future, this country might explore. But I'll turn to you.
Yes, a lot to say and think. Thank you for that. I love your statement earlier about how can we build coalitions in France. This is a tough question on race and these things. It's a very tough questions because the republic I mentioned earlier is built on colorblind foundations, but it's just a myth, right? Because people are diverse as much as here. In the meantime, it's an ideal we should just agree with. There's no race. Race should not exist, right? Does not exist. And back in the time, people did not see races. It's something that has been created, made, you know? So now we are there. Even if by myself or yourself, you did not see yourself as a black person, the society will remind you that you are a black person. That's the problem. You can say, okay, there's no race, but there's racism. So how can you live with that? That's the problem we have. And there's also a gap between the way it's handled in the society and in the elites. That's what I experience. In the elites, it's always a big deal, you know, like people stressing colorblind society, but stressing that you are a black person every time. So yes, now, but can you just recover from it and it's okay? Can you move on? And it triggers a lot of questions. You have to provide a lot of explanation. The standard of requirements is very, very high, you know, and you can feel it. But that's how it is. That's our condition, you know. And here, when I'm in this country, seeing all these debates around DAI, these ugly words, DAI hire, it's about me too, you know. Everybody who has this skin is targeted with these new accusations. It's violent, you know. I don't know how, I mean, it's not possible. Society cannot survive to something like this. Like, you don't have any talent, you don't deserve what you have, you are just here because you have been hired for inclusivity reasons. I also face these kind of things in France, you know. Oh, how is it possible that she can be a member of the government at her age? I told you the story. I told you the story. I campaign. I try. I work for that. But it's never enough. So we face exactly the same problem, but the solutions are totally different. And I explained that in my new book. You mobilize tools based on race issues, etc. We don't have that. We have education. That's what I said. Because if there's an issue, the problem is not about race, it's about social, it's about, yeah, inequalities, social inequalities, not racial inequalities. The second difference is we don't have the organizations you have. A historically black university. In France, the first question would be, why white people are not allowed in this university? You know? Are they? Are they?
There's some here.
But that would be the question. There's no history like your history, you know, related. I know what's the history, what's the background, but we don't have the same system. So we don't have these organizations like NAACP, Black Lives Matter. We don't have all this stuff. So there's no minority. You use the word minority. There's no, the concept does not exist. It's not recognized. So how can we live with that? How can we do with that? That's the problem we have, and we still have. And at some point, we'll have to find the right words to designate the people like me, because there are some expressions we use, but they don't fit. To embrace the problems, the challenges. We cannot talk about violence in police, you know, because it would be recognizing racism and races, and it's not what we do because of a colorblind society. Once again, it's a perfect ideal. That's how everything should work. But since everything does not work like that, how can we handle that question? It's a question that is coming to us. They will have to face, because there's a lot of African immigrants. Their kids and grandkids are now, their children are now French citizens, and they are a part of the nation. And we are facing huge problems with the far right about these communities. So, but we are different from the United States. We always say we are not America. So we cannot use the tools you are mobilizing in this country. So what kind of tools should we mobilize then? There's nobody to answer that terrible question.
But they're still learnings.
Yeah. So we are learning from your mistakes and your achievements.
That's what I love.
And achievements, because there's, I mean, you got a black president. I remember my teachers teaching me that in the 50s, black artists like James Baldwin, they came to Paris because they wanted to flee from racism in the United States. You know? So yeah, it's maybe for season 2.
But I think conversations like this matter, and they help as you think about, what to take, what not to take, what to learn from, both, mistakes and successes. Having these types of conversations that transcend borders is going to be increasingly more important. That's why I started with my excitement about the partnership that we have now with on the North American continent, with Mexico and with Canada, to have these conversations. How can we actually advance the cause for communities of color on these continents? I mean, in Mexico, similar to, not even designated, not even recognized, not even seen, right? Until recently, until very recently. And so, I think it becomes increasingly more important. And there's last thing that I want to say goes back to something that Stacey shared, and that's, I think we also have to change what we expect from democracy. We cannot expect that democracy demands conformity. It's not going to, and we shouldn't expect that. There's been a lot of talk about unity, even in this country, about what that looks like. That doesn't mean unity in everything. It doesn't mean that we all have to think the same way. What it should mean is that everyone has equal access to share their opinion, to engage with the democratic process. That's what it should mean. But it doesn't require conformity of thought. And I think far too often we have thought in democracy that in order for it to be democracy, we must all, come together and believe, the same things and advance. But that's not what actually democracy means. And I think we are learning that as we embark on and continue to embark on this democratic experience in this country.
Yes, well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. You guys are amazing, and I feel motivated to get out there and talk to my peers and vote. So thank you. And thank you to the audience for coming.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
You had great questions.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to Ms. McGann, Mr. Kovler, Ambassador Yade, and Ms. Murray. Thank you all so much. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you to all of you for staying. I know we could have stayed here for another 3 hours probably, but it's late. But for those of you who want to make sure to stay abreast of everything that we do at the Bunch Center, I would encourage you to please go to global.howard.edu and sign up for our newsletter and stay in touch. And if you're on social media, HU Bunch Center on Instagram, and the whole name, Ralph Bunch International Affairs Center, Howard University, on Facebook, if that's your preferred social media site.
I also think we need a round of applause for Dr. Hope. Thank you so much, Brendan.